Well, the Corn Dog went 15-0 in 2019. National champions beating the Clemson Tigers in the championship game. And it's a little ironic because, of course, Clemson sort of has the reputation, or you hear people say all the time, the whole Clemson don't play nobody routine. Never mind the fact that hasn't Clemson played 2 SEC teams a year in the regular season for each of the last 4 years? South Carolina and Texas A&M the last 2 seasons. I think they played Auburn in a home and home the 2 seasons before that. Never mind the fact they beat the absolute bejesus out of Alabama in the national championship game the season before. The same Alabama team that we were told all year was the greatest Alabama team in history. So, I mean, my thoughts on Clemson scheduling and whatever are crystal clear, right? Is the ACC terrible? Yes. Is that Clemson's fault? No. Do they have a terrible non-con schedule? No. And, you know, just because you beat up on bad teams during the regular season doesn't mean you aren't a good team. Look at the scores of the Clemson games. But of all the sort of criticism, fair or unfair, that Clemson catches for their schedule in the regular season, it's the exact opposite for LSU, right? Almost everybody agrees LSU had one of the toughest schedules in all of America last year, especially if you want to look at like strength of record or strength of schedule rankings for 2019. They're at or near the very top in every single poll you look at when it comes to that, right? They played Texas, they played Alabama, they played Florida, they played Auburn, they played Georgia in an SEC title game. And how many top 10 teams is that, right? Then ran through the playoffs really without any trouble at all. So LSU clearly the best team in 2019. It really wasn't even close. There are some years where you can look at a national title team and maybe say, well, they got lucky in this game or that game, or, you know, if the other team wouldn't have done this or that, things might have been different, whatever. Not the case in 2019. The Corn Dog was clearly the best team in college football last season. In this video, we're going to take a look at their schedule in 2020. Is it harder? Is it easier? Hard to imagine it could be much harder than what we saw last year. This isn't a prediction video. I'm not going to try to guess their record or how well they might do, or if they can repeat as SEC or national champs. We're just going to take a look at the schedule and try to get an overall idea of what LSU is facing in 2020. Let's go. I've done a whole series of these videos now, and I'm going to keep it going for another week and a half or 2 weeks or so. I got a bunch of teams I want to try to get through. I'll put a link to a playlist up here somewhere, and you can click that playlist or click the link. It'll take you to the playlist, and you can see all the teams that we've done so far. If there's some you've missed or there's some you're interested in or whatever, you can click on them, take a look, and watch them. But today, we are going to do LSU. Now, I'm going to do this the same way I've been doing it. We're going to take a brief look at 2019 schedule, just so we have a comparison for 2020. Again, we're not talking about records or anything. We're just looking at who did they play, where did they play them, non-con, road games, and then we'll look at 2020 and sort of compare the two. Like I said, is 2020, is it an easier road for LSU in 2020, strictly going by the schedule, or is it a harder road? 2019, here's the schedule. I'll put it up on the screen for you, but clearly they ran through the regular season 12-0. This is a regular season preview video for 2020, so we're focusing on LSU's regular season schedule for the purposes of this video. But in the non-con, they had Georgia Southern, Texas, Northwestern State, and Utah State, right? And, of course, they beat them all 4-0 in the non-con. Georgia Southern, they blew them out. Texas ended up being a pretty good game there early in week 2. Probably one of the most entertaining games that we saw all season from any team at all. That was a great game. LSU goes on the road, gets a big win early in the season at Texas, and really gave them a lot of momentum, I think, propelled them forward for what was to come during the rest of the season. And that was when people really started to say, okay, this new offense that we've been hearing about at LSU, maybe there's something to it, right? And then, of course, you ran through Northwestern State and Utah State. Now, stuck sort of sandwiched in between there, you started your SEC play on the road at Vandy, and you destroyed them 66-38. But this is where people started to say, well, okay, the offense is unbelievable, but what happened to LSU's defense? And this is where you started to see some doubt creep in about LSU's defense in 2019. But then they beat Florida at home by a couple of touchdowns, 42-28. Beat Auburn in a low-scoring game, 23-20. Probably the closest LSU came to losing. Now, LSU was able to move up and down the field fairly easily in that game like they did in almost every other game, but for whatever reason, turnovers bogged down in the red zone. They didn't score the points that we were used to see them scoring, but you did come out with a win there at home against the Barn, 23-20. You had a bye week, and then your last 4 games at Alabama, that was the big one. People were waiting on that one. Whoever wasn't a believer in LSU by the time that game was over, they were a believer at that point. You beat Alabama on the road in Tuscaloosa, 46-41. Then that Ole Miss game came around, and that was another sort of a weird one. You beat them 58-37, but you gave up 400-something yards rushing in that game again. Some people, including me, sort of questioning the defense. The offense, unbelievable, probably the best in college football, but is the defense good enough to take them all the way? Of course, we found out it was. Their defense played much better the last couple of weeks of the regular season and wins against Arkansas and Texas A&M, and they went on to finish 15-0. So undefeated in the non-con, the big one being on the road at Texas. Road games at Texas, at Vandy, at Mississippi State, at Bama, and at Ole Miss. At Texas and at Alabama are impressive. You win at Texas and at Alabama in the same season, chances are you're a pretty good team, and of course we know that to be the case for LSU. Week 7, 8, and 9 was pretty tough. You ran through it. Florida at Mississippi State, home against Auburn. Florida and Auburn were both top 10 teams at that time. Auburn borderline top 10, I guess, after losing to Minnesota in the bowl game, but they were top 10 at that time, as was Florida. Florida finished top 10 in a big road win at Mississippi State. And then 11, 12, and 13, of course, Alabama on the road, Ole Miss on the road, home against Arkansas. Anytime you got Alabama, it automatically makes it a pretty tough stretch of games. You handled that, though. 12-0 in the regular season. Hey, why don't you do me a favor? Subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post college football videos almost every single day of the year. And believe it or not, some of them are even watchable. That's right. And if you're enjoying this series of schedule previews that we're doing for the 2020 college football season, give this video a thumbs up. It doesn't cost you any money, doesn't take you hardly any time at all to do it, but it's a huge help to me and I would appreciate it. All right, let's take a look at the 2020 schedule now. Again, we're not talking about a record here and what they might do in 2020. We're purely looking at the schedule. Here it is. Is this schedule easier or harder than it was in 2019? Well, let's go through it. Your non-con schedule is similar to what we saw last year. You play UT San Antonio at home, you play Nichols at home, and you play Rice in a neutral site game in Houston. Those are 3 lower teams that you should handle without a problem. And then, of course, you have the second leg of the home and home with Texas.
We're back.
And you get them at home this year because you played them on the road in Austin last year. In my opinion, the non-con schedule a little bit easier in 2020 than it was in 2019, simply because you get Texas at home as opposed to on the road. Again, I'm not talking about whether Texas is better or worse than last year or whether LSU is better or worse. Purely going by the schedule here, you'd rather have a home game than an away game, clearly. So the non-con appears to be a little bit easier, I think, than what we saw last year. As far as your SEC schedule goes, you open up week 4 at home against Ole Miss, and then week 6 and 7 are on the road at Florida and Arkansas. Always tricky to play back-to-back road games in the SEC. Florida's expected to be pretty good again.
Yeah, War Eagle.
Arkansas, complete rebuild mode with a new coaching staff. Come back home, you take on Mississippi State, and then you get your bye week before a pretty tough last 4 here. Home against Bama, on the home against South Carolina, and then back-to-back road games to end the season at Auburn and at Texas A&M. So we talked about the non-con. As far as the SEC schedule goes, your road schedule is pretty difficult in that you have 2 different times where you play back-to-back road games, and that's just not easy to do. Now, the good news is you don't have to travel to Tuscaloosa like you did last year. You get Alabama at home. Most people assume that'll be LSU's toughest game of the season. We'll see. At Florida won't be easy either. At Auburn, never easy. I'm going to say your road schedule is actually a little bit more difficult in 2020 than it was in 2019, at least the SEC portion of the schedule. You had at Vandy, at Mississippi State, and at Ole Miss. Those were 3 of the worst teams in the SEC last year. You played all of them on the road. Now, you did have the game at Alabama, which clearly is probably the most difficult road game you could possibly have. But then in 2020, you get Florida at home, Florida on the road, Auburn on the road, and Texas A&M on the road. Texas A&M is kind of a wild card. They got Kellen Mond back, Jimbo Fisher Are they finally going to sort of get over the hump and win more than 8 games or so? We'll see. But Florida and Auburn are expected to have pretty good teams. And on the road at Arkansas, not much to worry about there. Toughest stretch of games, well, 10, 11, 12, 13 are just tough. Alabama and South Carolina, you get both of them at home. South Carolina I don't think will be very good, but Alabama clearly will. And then you close the season with back-to-back road games, and that's just never easy to do. Back-to-back road games are difficult no matter what conference you're in, particularly in the SEC where home field advantage can be so important. You have to go on the road and play Auburn, and then on the road to close things out against Texas A&M, which the Corn Dogs still having nightmares from 2 years ago when you closed the season out on the road at Texas A&M with the referee issues and that 6 or 7 overtime game, whatever it was. But anyway, there it is. That's the 2020 schedule for the Corn Dog. It's going to be another tough schedule for LSU. Now, the good news is if you're an LSU fan, like I said, you had what most people would agree is the toughest schedule, at least if, according to strength of record and strength of schedule, of any team in America in 2019. And really, you ran through it like poop through a tin horn for the most part. Florida or Auburn gave you a scare. Bama gave you a scare. But outside of that, you really blew everybody out. We'll see. LSU's not going to be scared of the schedule. That's for sure. You play in the SEC West, you're going to have a tough schedule every single year. You throw in that non-con game with Texas. I mean, we don't know what we're going to get with them. Are they back?
We're back.
Of course, they're back. They're back every single offseason. They have that in common with Tennessee.
Boom.
And Miami.
Boom.
I could probably go on and on with a list. But anyway, that's the schedule for LSU in 2020. So let me know down below, guys. What do you think about this schedule? How does it compare to 2019? Easier or harder? And what do you think about these 2 different points in the schedule where they have the back-to-back road games? At Florida and at Arkansas, week 6 and 7. And then you close things out week 12 and 13 at Auburn, at Texas A&M. It's hard. It would be hard for any team, I think, to win all 4 of those games on the road in those places. Arkansas, the easiest of those, I would say. Then probably Texas A&M. And then at Florida and at Auburn, I think will be very difficult games. Throw in a home game with Alabama and a home game with Texas. And that, if LSU wins the West and makes it to the SEC title game, they will have earned it for sure. This is a tough schedule. So we'll see what they can do. Anyway, that's going to do it for that. Have a good morning.
You're either truly football ignorant or you're being willfully stupid and you just refuse to accept the obvious. But these are the facts. Jake Fromm does not have the ability to make anyone else around him any better. He doesn't. Jake Fromm needs people around him to make him better. Period. His best year was 2017 when we had a loaded offense. 2 first-round NFL running backs, multiple NFL wide receivers at both wide receiver positions and the slot